How are you navigating through these new expectations that people have? What have you learned? What's worked? What hasn't?
Back in like 2017 and 18, right? We had started to do some research. Where we, particularly with our front line, this concept of flexibility, things that you're hearing all the time now. And we took all the data that we had and we boiled it to three things. And we still use this as a bit of our foundation and our platform today. It's about people first and foremost want to know that you care, and that you care about them as the individual, not the body and the job. This concept of connection came out so loudly, right? I'm during the pandemic, people were saying, I'm risking my life to do these jobs. How I need to feel connected to the place I work and to the people I'm working with. And then lastly, obviously, I'm here to provide for my family and to fulfill myself.
You are listening to Personalization Outbreak, a podcast about the collapse of traditional corporate standards in today's more personalized world. I'm Glenn Llopis. I'm a leadership strategist, author, contributor to Forbes, and founder of the Leadership in the Age of Personalization movement. On this show, I'm interviewing executives across multiple sectors to find out how the balance between standardization and personalization can exist. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak podcast. I think we can all agree that the pandemic really served as an accelerant in rethinking the ways that we work, the ways we lead, the ways we conduct business. It made us all think differently about how to empower our employees by leveraging their voices and their opinions. It created an opportunity to finally see them as the real change agents. In other words, employees are now consumers, and we can no longer make assumptions about who belongs where, doing what, and how. As leaders in organizations, we must be more in touch with what matters to our employees as individuals. And this means that we need to take the time to learn from them and listen to what they have to say. Now, to help us learn more about how to address these new opportunities in today's workplace, our guest today is Andrea Ferrara, Chief Human Resources Officer for PepsiCo Beverages North America. Now, I've had an opportunity to get to know Andrea, and she's pretty cool. Wait till you hear the way that she speaks and just how real she is. And I share this with you because, her objective is to truly transform the employee experience and to build a foundation for individual growth that contributes to the overall success of PepsiCo's global portfolio. Now, as you will experience yourself, and you will, Andrea is passionate about serving the needs of others, specifically women in the workplace and frontline workers at PepsiCo and beyond. But before we get started, please click the like button below, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to our social media and YouTube channel at Glenn Llopis. Andrea, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And more importantly, thank you for taking the time to address an issue that is extraordinarily relevant, that matters not only to the employees, but to you as well as an executive. So thank you for your time.
No, Glenn, thank you. First and foremost, I don't think I've had anybody ever introduce me as kind. Those were just kind and sweet words. So that means a lot. And I think kudos to you, right? Because I think this is such an important topic. And you don't always see a lot of podcasts that are dedicated to this degree of specificity when you're talking about work and how employees feel and this connection. So I'm excited to spend some time with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Well, to get started, let's start with you. What inspired you to pursue this career, and how have these aspirations evolved over the years? Let's face it, the HR function has evolved greatly, and you've hung in there. Tell us, what has inspired you for this role to matter so much to you in service of others?
Yeah, I actually grew up in a small town in Western Pennsylvania. And it was a heavy kind of industrial town, big coal mining town, electrical workers. And in the 70s, the mine, you started to see the mines go away, as the country shifted. And I just always got pulled into watching these people that dedicated their lives to these industries. And as the industries folded, trying to lean in and start to help these folks. And so I think that was kind of the first calling, Glenn. And then as I got into college, I majored in economics, but I concentrated in labor economics. And then that led me to get a master's in labor relations. And then, when Pepsi came calling back in 1990, it just felt like such a right fit, right? It felt like the function at PepsiCo was one where the discipline played a pretty, I think, intrusive role into how we run the business. And I think that's one of the things that's been a point of passion for me the entire career here, is that the function has a voice, the function helps shape the agenda, and the function helps shape the culture. And I think all of that matters, right? I think that's one of the most important things we can do for our business leaders. And so my passion really started kind of early on. And I think it was largely because my friends' parents, I watched what some of my friends' parents were going through.
Drea, this is such a cool way to start, because you have just given us a tremendous example of the importance of someone's backstory. We oftentimes think that we're supposed to fit the role, but what's happening now is that the role is supposed to fit the individual. And of course, a healthy balance between the two, but your backstory really helps us understand why the role matters to you. And not just that, how your backstory has actually prepared you to lead in a way that is more in alignment with how you grew up and what you experienced and what you observed than when you actually started your career. So in many cases, you were meant for this moment. See the connection?
I do. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, but this is the point, is we often think that, as we're working to empower our employees, as things have changed, it's not until you go deep into where people come from, what they stand for and what matters to them, that, we're more prepared for this time than we think. But we don't really get take the time to get to know people to understand just how ready people are. So I share that because in the work that you're doing right now at PepsiCo, how are you navigating through these new expectations that people have? What have you learned? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really important question. I'd say, Glenn, we started to see a change in kind of needs, wants, and expectations back in like 2017 and 18, right? We had started to do some research, where we, particularly with our front line, this concept of flexibility, things that you're hearing all the time now. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like, it went from, hey, this would be nice to have, to this is a must have. And what we saw was those trends just got accelerated. And it forced us to sort of take a pause and realize, in this time of unbelievable high stress and uncertainty, we literally took a step back and said, what are almost the fundamental needs of people, right? And we took all the data that we had, and we boiled it to three things, and we still use this as a bit of our foundation and our platform today. It's about people, first and foremost, want to know that you care, and that you care about them as the individual, not the body and the job, right? But you care about me, the person. Two, this concept of connection came out so loudly, right? I'm during the pandemic, people were saying, I'm risking my life to do these jobs. How I need to feel connected to the place I work and to the people I'm working with. And then lastly, obviously, I'm here to provide for my family and to fulfill myself. And so this concept of career took on a bit more of an enhanced meaning. And so we literally started from this foundation of, it's about care, connection, and career, and everything we tried to do for our associates was to ladder to those sort of three. I almost call that our true north.
I want to take a step back a moment because you said something that is so relevant today. And I think we think about these things, but we do not dare to talk about them. And I know that you're going to enlighten us right now. You said moving from nice to have to must have. Again, I'm sure these are learning moments for all of us, but when did you know, or the organization, when did it know that it went from nice to must? What was the pivotal moment where you said, it's time? Because I think that oftentimes that leaders will see these nice to haves, and as they start to evolve, it's almost as if they create the illusion within their own minds that, yeah, it's just still a nice to have. And they're not ready to take that leap of faith to say, no, it's time, especially when it comes to people. When did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be fair, I think we've been blessed at PepsiCo to have leaders that those weren't foreign concepts, right? But I think your push is the right one. I think, I think during the pandemic, right? Like in the height of the pandemic, we realized that we were trying to keep people physically safe, but as importantly, we were trying to keep people emotionally safe and mentally strong, right? And that was a bit of a complete new muscle for us in a way that we had never thought about having to do it on such a large scale. And so I think that honestly, Glenn, was the shift when this concept of care and connection in particular shifted from, hey, it's nice to do, to, gosh, like you need to do these things and you need to lead differently and you need to be way more. I talked a lot about it during the pandemic about being much more of a conscious leader, right? When you've been a leader for so many years, sometimes you go into almost an unconscious way of doing it. And this concept of being really conscious and purposeful around this concept of care and connection, the pandemic is really what sort of brought it to life, because it forced us to think across a much broader scale of things versus just, hey, the job and how I'm performing in the job. It's like, no, this person needs to be mentally and emotionally well and strong too. And there was just so many stress points on people outside the work that couldn't help but come into the workplace.
I love that response. And I want to, again, I'm not trying to get too deep, but this is these are the things that people want to learn and understand, because you said something very important, the consciousness to be aware that these things are happening, when, as I call it, standardization almost wires us to be unaware of these things that are so personal and meaningful to people. That's a difficult muscle to rewire. So were there any specific steps that you took in that rewiring? Was it just more of helping people, or did people started to see themselves that they had to be more self-directed with that particular action?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple things, right? I mean, a global pandemic it forces you to sort of all hands on deck, right? It's this galvanizing moment where everybody's trying to do the same thing, right? And so I think what it did was it sort of took different agendas and it put everybody on this common agenda around, our number one thing is to keep our people safe and employed and keep this business running, right? Because we felt we had an obligation to do that for our consumers and our customers. And so that helped, right? Having this sort of galvanizing moment. And then I think what we tried to do from a human resources standpoint was to be very overt around the tools and the processes that our leaders could use to do that. Because what we were trying to do is they were under intense stress as well, right? All of a sudden the world's flipped on its head. And so what we tried to do is, as quickly and as simply as possible, get a set of tools to people that took the pressure off of, it's not what you have to do, it's how you have to do it, right? And so we gave them the what, and then they could sort of personalize the how. But yeah, it was a very, very stressful time. But I go back and I say, I think that was a bit of the impetus for us to keep pushing on this work, because as I said before, the playing field kind of changed.
Well, you're ahead of it, and thank you for your leadership. Now, you've shared with me before, Drea, that part of what your role is making a big company feel small. And at a company as large as PepsiCo, how are you finding ways to deliver this new level of customization and personalization?
Yeah, we do a lot of survey work, Glenn. I mean, we obviously have these organizational health surveys that we do every year across PepsiCo. But one of the things we've done within the North American beverage space was actually take that a bit deeper, and we did it in partnership with our foods business. And we really looked at sort of emotional attributes, sort of the technical components of the job, as well as the compensation components of the job. And we asked our associates to kind of rank these things in order. And you'd always think that like money and vacation would be the things that would be the top 10 things. It was really surprising to see, yeah, of course, compensations is right up there. But, things like trust in my peers, things like feeling energized by the job that I do, things like having a positive sense in my community. Those are not things that we typically had heard in the past. Now, to be fair, maybe we didn't ask the same way we did coming, as we started to come out of the pandemic. But this big insight for me was, when you have that degree of understanding around what's important to people, you then can, and I ladder back up to those 3 C's, you then can drive a much more, what I would say, customized or personalized experience for people against those 3 C's. So if, care and obviously from a care and connection standpoint, if you understand that for some of these associates, the sense of community is really important, then what does that location do to make a material difference in the town or the city in which they work, right? And it's getting to that level of customization that we're trying to do. Now, it's hard to do that consistently across 400 sites every day, but that's the journey that we're on. And it takes those insights to be able to understand that the things we thought would keep employees happy, 5-7 years ago, isn't what's going to keep them happy and engaged today.
Well, and that's the whole thing. And you said it perfectly, right? People want to be seen and they want to be known. And they want to be seen and known in a way that matters to them. I've always said this to people. Take some time and ask your colleagues or even leaders, how do you perceive me? And based on your perception of me, how does that shape what you expect from me? And this is what you've enlightened me with caring and connection, because that's that part of that process. And that takes time to scale. And the fact that you're already there, I could only imagine what things are going to look like for you in the next 5 years. So as we shift to helping, how do we redefine work and its relationships, right? We've also have to learn to develop new ways to learn and listen. And this is so critically important, because I continue to see that it's easy when you become accustomed or wired, subconsciously or unconsciously to listen to sameness, but listening to difference is a lot more difficult. And at PepsiCo, knowing that you work with people in frontline and corporate capacities, what are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest things we hear is this concept around, how do I stay energized, and how do I have a career that's mine and not necessarily sort of the standard, way that you used to try to build careers. And it's been an interesting little evolution for us, because I think, I'd say pre-pandemic, we were very methodical on how we would try to do that for people, right? Well, you start here. And I mean, if I look at my own career, right? Like you started in the field, then you did and then you go to headquarters, and like you sort of took these steps. And what we're finding now, and this is even with our front line, it's this blend around let me know what is possible, and then let me sort of help shape what's important to me at the different points in my, kind of in my life cycle. And it's not easy to do, right? Because you've got some people that want to stay in these small town locations, and how do you provide growth and development? And that's going to look differently, I think, than it would for someone that said, no, I want to be the CEO and I'm going to move every two, right? And so it's sort of having this macro framework, but again, allowing this degree of customization and personalization with guidance, and doing it at scale in a consistent manner. And I think all of those things have to happen, Glenn, which is really where the heavy lifting is, right? It's super easy to take the small group of leaders that are going to be able to have the runway and focus on them. But how do you do it for 60,000 people where they have this connection and this engagement, where when you go back to what people told us, where I have this energy, I feel energized and I feel connected and I feel like I matter. And I feel like you see me as the person, you don't see me as just the job, or like the machine operator or the CDL driver. You see me as Drea, the person. And I think it's aspirational for sure. But when I think about where we're trying to get, those are sort of the higher order outcomes I hope that we're trying to drive against.
Well, but here's the good news, at least I've learned this. Over time, the organization will train itself. It'll become organic, because once there's that level of trust, people are going to start talking about it. And once they start talking about it, I'm sure that you've provided them the tools to do this. They'll start creating their own communities of people to continue to work on those things with each other, because this is something that requires a tremendous amount of ownership by the individual. I mean, there's only so much that the organization can really influence. It's really, like you said at the beginning, it's about empowering the people to realize that this is an accepted behavior that we want to embrace. And that's what I'm getting from the discussion thus far.
Yep. No, that's really well said. I mean, I think, for us, what we're trying to do is have people come in and have no barriers around them, right? It's what do you want to do? What do you have the capability and the capacity to do? And then let's partner together to make those things come true. And it's going to look different for every single person. And that's right. For me, that's the fun part, right?
Right. And again, some people will buy in, some people won't.
Yeah.
But what this is doing, it's almost helping the organization reset itself as it moves into the future. So anyway, I love this discussion. Let's go to talent pipeline, right? Okay. You know that to maintain growth, companies have to have a strong pipeline of talent for all roles. And one thing that you've discussed, is that when it comes to talent attraction and retention, it's important that we're leading with what's possible. Can you elaborate on what that means and how that has inspired programs like She is PepsiCo?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I am so proud to be a part of PepsiCo is we've got this rich history of, bringing people in very early in their career, even into frontline roles like our merchandiser or machine operator. And these folks can rise through the organization. And, we've got wonderful examples of senior vice presidents and division presidents that started in these entry-level positions. And so I think with that as a foundation, it's this wonderful richness of our DNA that I think makes coming to PepsiCo so special. And so, the She is PepsiCo campaign kind of a little bit spawned off of that sort of underlying DNA, which was our frontline roles are the majority of them are held by men, right? When you think about CDL drivers or merchandisers or warehouse loaders, it's not that we don't have women in them, obviously we do, but they tend to be more, male dominated roles. And so the concept of She is PepsiCo was really trying to get back to that, what is possible, right? And showing women in a really unique way that you can come into PepsiCo, you can have this wonderful career, and what that can spawn in the future. And so this is the third year we've done it, and we've actually expanded it globally. But what we've done is we've the locations have nominated women that have demonstrated the PepsiCo values, and we wrap their picture on a truck. And
Oh my,
it's
it's
amazing.
great.
And we actually had one of our women that was recognized this year actually is a CDL licensed driver. She literally drove her truck into the corporate headquarters here in Purchase, New York, and we actually did the celebration. We celebrated her here, and it's such an amazing way to recognize people. And it shows women that, yeah, if this is where you are in your life and this is the kind of work, don't be afraid to try it. And then if you do try it, it opens up so many other doors. And so the thing I love about the She is PepsiCo campaign is it sort of builds off that DNA. And one of the things we're so proud of this promote from within culture, but it also went out there and said, gosh, there's like half the population that may not think PepsiCo is a place for them. And we want women to realize that it is. So that's a little bit of the blend.
I love it. Well, I know you're a strong advocate for women in leadership, and I'm a big proponent of that. I grew up with incredible women in my life, and I've always said this, and I love going on record and saying this: women are those that are teaching us how to relearn the role of being a leader. And I've written about this on Forbes. So if anyone wants to Google it, you can challenge me, because I tell you, I've always believed this about women, and I'm glad that PepsiCo is doing great things to create that level of awareness as well. Well, look, Drea, we can talk forever, but I want to close by asking you this question. What advice do you have for one of your peers, a fellow CHRO, that is listening right now and knows that this is important, but doesn't know how to get started? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we've always tried to do is, and I think the CHROs will know this, it's start with what's the business problem to solve, right? And then I think when I always try to get one or two key pieces of insight that will have a material impact on my business, right? And then I take that insight and I try to translate that into the implication that if we fixed it would have on the business. And then you just try to pick one or two things to go do to move the needle. And that's really how the 3 C's came about, right? We were in this pandemic. We had high stress. People didn't know what to do. People were, it was chaos like you couldn't believe. And it was literally just sort of taking a step back and saying, what do I want to try to drive? Right? I need to drive engagement. I need to stabilize everything right now. And I think sometimes, Glenn, it feels like you're trying to boil the ocean. And the best piece of advice I can give people is simplify it down, ladder up to the higher order, and be just really purposeful in the steps you take, because it really is about embedding and institutionalizing these behaviors into your culture and into your business, versus throwing out a lot of things that just don't stick, right? And it's hard sometimes when you're under business pressure. You try to do 10 things. My experience has been it's hard for organizations and people that they lose capacity, right? So pick the most meaningful things and double down.
Drea, you've been awesome. Thanks for taking the
I
time.
appreciate
And I've really appreciated the way you've articulated these things. Are very, they're very digestible and actionable. And so I really appreciate the time that you've taken. You've been wonderful, and I'd love to continue this discussion maybe next year after you've got some more data behind it, because I think it's, the whole journey. And this is a process, and it's something that requires a tremendous amount of patience, but more than anything, requires leadership. And that's what you're providing the organization. And I'm sure that people know it. So thank you again for your time. And as we close every show, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't, do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Drea, thank you very, very much for your time today.
Thank you. Enjoyed the chat.
Thanks for listening to Personalization Outbreak. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. If you enjoyed the content, Visit ageofpersonalization.com to check out our free streaming video series and learn how to get involved in the movement. I'm Glenn Llopis. I wish you a good day, and remember, without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution.